extremely fortunate to have Michael Ferrer here. Michael has been part of our program here for probably 5 years.
2010 is the first time I spoke here.
2010, you spoke for Tim Allen.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. So he's been here longer than I. He's a specialist in primarily industrial and office here in the Charleston area. However, he currently owns his own companies, but he has worked for several large groups here, and I'm going to have him give you his background in a minute. And he also is a very influential person in our internship program. I think, well, I've been here, he's had at least 8. So, and he probably had them before I was here. So, so he's taken on students just about every term, and those students get a fantastic exposure to the field. They get to shadow him, go to meetings that he has, go to showings that he has, go to work on databases, make all sorts of connections. It's just a fantastic. He just basically opens up and helps you however you want to be helped. So with that, Michael, thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, Dr. Warzala. I appreciate it. It's always a lot of fun. So before I get started, I was just kind of curious, how many of you guys think are pretty serious about getting into commercial real estate specifically, whether it's property management, brokerage, being an analyst, whatever? Show of hands? Okay, so a lot of you guys kind of, good. I always like to know the audience and who I'm talking to. I mean, I was a college kid, and there's certainly classes that I was certainly a lot more pumped when the speaker came than others. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with what your interests lie. And then the other thing, too, is this presentation is for y'all's benefit. Trust me, I've done it enough times. I welcome questions. Raise your hands at any point. You don't have to wait to the end. I want to answer your questions. I'm here as a resource for you guys. And at the end, you know, depending on how quick we move through this, I try to leave as much time as I can to answer questions, whether it's about real estate, exposing you to other avenues or opportunities within the field that I wasn't even aware of when I was an undergraduate, and what it's like to do it day to day. Whatever you want to ask me, I'm pretty much an open book. So that's what we're here for, excuse me. Anyway, so as Dr. Warzala alluded to earlier, let's hope I don't mess this up. Woohoo, it worked. All right, I am Mike Ferrer. I started in this market in 2002. Got out of college, and when I moved down to Charleston after Clemson, I basically had 4 career opportunities. I could be a pedicab driver, a waiter, or I could sell insurance or you know, banking or real estate. That's basically it. There was not the amount of corporate jobs that there are now where you can kind of move and advance your way up a company. So I was like, well, I didn't want to be selling insurance policies to people at cocktail parties because no one likes to hang out with the life insurance guy. So I'd already done the food and beverage thing, so I figured, oh, that pretty much leaves me with real estate because I still, to this day, don't really like bankers. Anyway, so those are my options. Those are my choices. So I went into a company brand new, didn't know the difference between a triple net lease, a full service lease, didn't know what I didn't even know. And I started with a large international company, and I worked up from there, got a couple other opportunities along the way, got to run an office here for a Charlotte-based company, and when that folded, I decided I never wanted someone to pull the rug out for me ever again, so I was just going to start my own business, and that's what I did. And fortunately, I've been lucky enough to get acknowledged a little bit along the way, Leadership Charleston, 40 under 40, stuff like that. And again, that's kind of boring. If you want to read it later, you're welcome to. So why am I here today? I'm here to talk to you about the impact of the supply chain logistics on industrial real estate here locally, right? And show you how interconnected all this is. I'm sure a lot of guys see things on the news. People talk about things in faraway lands, and it's like, well, why do I care? What's the point, right? So there's a picture of the globe. Obviously, most of the stuff that we consume here gets made where, guys? Anyone know? China, right? Southeast Asia. The example I like to point to all the time is, how many of you do not have a smartphone in your pocket? Right, all of you do, right? Well, did any of you guys actually think about how they get there, right? And don't tell me I clicked on Amazon and they mailed it to me. Like, yeah, I get it. But what happens before you go on Amazon and it gets to your door? And that's kind of what we're talking about. So logistics, which is the next slide, there's your definition of it. I'm not going to read it to you. You guys will read it faster than I can read it out loud. What does that really mean? It doesn't really tell you anything, right? It's basically the coordination of the moving of stuff, right? How do I get raw materials or finished products from point A to point B? And obviously, there's a lot of steps in the supply chain. The one specifically we're focusing on is the buildings that handle all of this cargo. So, and then this is the big thing to think about, right? Right now, real estate in general is being disrupted on a lot of different fronts. We talked about Amazon. Amazon is destroying retail, right? Real estate. Almost every shopping center you go into now has 4 gyms in it because there's no more big box retailers anymore, right? I used to have to go to like Best Buy and get all pumped up to go and buy a CD or something. You guys probably never even used a CD except for target practice. We used to have to run down there and buy them, and there would be like 40,000 square feet. Well, now most of them, they're cutting their footprints down across the country to 10,000 square feet, so that they're just going to be a little showroom. And if you want to buy something there, it's the same as if you bought it online. The clerk goes up to the store, types it in, it comes from a distribution center, and it gets shipped to your house. So they're not carrying all that real estate. Office space has the same thing. Technology has reduced the demand. The average square feet per person has been reduced because of technology. The one that has been the most insulated to this point has been logistics and industrial real estate. And the reason being is almost everything we eat, wear, and consume comes off the back of a truck somewhere. So everything on your body was on a truck at some point. Your socks, your shoes, whatever you're wearing. And unless you're really, really super eco-friendly, most of your food's probably not farm to table. It came on a truck somewhere. This is why the world has gotten so interconnected, which is a good thing, because people have less incentive to go to war and to fight each other if we're all depending on each other for things. What are the different types of buildings? Anyone want to venture a guess some of the different product types would be in that market? Don't all jump up at once. Yes, right? Manufacturing plants. Good answer. That's one of the 4. Anyone else have any other ideas?
Warehouses.
Correct. Warehouses, right? I'm sorry? In this vertical, no, but that's a good guess. Thank you. Sir?
Distribution centers.
Correct. Those are larger warehouses. DCs is their abbreviator called. Very good answer. He stole your answer. Is that it? That's what everyone always says when you call him second. Here's your 4 examples, and that's the one that nobody got. And that's the one that's a little bit stranger or weird, and I'll go through and explain what each one of these are, right? So warehouses we mentioned typically are local or regionally serving. When you get into distribution centers, in our market, we categorize them as over 100,000 square feet and above. If you go to like Atlanta, they may start calling things distribution centers at 500,000 square feet and above. Be careful, because market to market, the delineation between a warehouse and a distribution center could be very much dictated by the size of the metro you're in. So that's roughly the size of the pie and how it's distributed between the 4 asset class here, right? We have roughly 67 million square feet. Now, to give you an idea, a frame of reference, Atlanta has 1 billion with a B. So we are literally a drop in the bucket compared to them. We're like a rounding error. So that's the difference between like a tier 1 metro and a tier 3 metro like we are. Now, why would a community like Atlanta have that many orders of magnitude more space than a community like Charleston? Anyone want to guess? What's way bigger? Exactly. Cargo stops where the rooftops are, right? That's what they say in my industry. So even though we have a very big port here where we process a lot of things, not a lot of stuff gets consumed locally in our area, right? So when you go to a place like Atlanta, which the metropolitan statistical area of Atlanta has roughly twice the population of our entire state. So if you are Sam's Club, if you are Lowe's, if you are Target, where are you going to put your distribution center? You're going to locate that probably closer to the larger populations that you're serving, right? So in addition to that, you also need linkages, right? You need to have rail or highways and labor pool. All those things contribute into the decision-making process. But at the end of the day, rooftop or cargo stops where the rooftops are. So that last slide that was blank, I think my last intern forgot to drop the last slide deck in there. That was supposed to be the picture of the large distribution center. There's a Sam's Club in Charleston, 560,000 square feet. It was mostly patio furniture and bizarre things like that. This is a local warehouse. This is a project that I've leased and managed for a number of years. The tenants that go in there, like this one right here, is a A&M Precision. They build the scaffoldings for Boeing workers to stand on when they work on the planes. The other 3 in there are all tied to the residential and multifamily housing boom. So 2 of those guys are HVAC distributors, and one of them is a siding distributor or whatever. So those warehouses are all roughly about, these are 30,000 square feet in the top and bottom, 30, and that one's 20. So just to give you an idea of sizes versus that over that 100,000 mark we talked about for DCs. Yeah, that's a big DC, so she did find that one. So you can see in that one, some of the things that are important, guys, and that's different, is you can see there's a lot more surface parking out there because you're dealing with a lot more trucks. The smaller ones usually get one 53-foot truck, like a tractor trailer a week, and then they have service vehicles that leave from those smaller warehouses that don't need as much circulation for turning around, staging, and parking. And those are all things that go into like your building classifications. I'm sure you guys talked about what makes an A building or a B building or C building. So those are the bells and whistles in industrial real estate. It's not the most glamorous of the disciplines, to tell you the truth. Kind of get a lot of the ugly ducklings of real estate. No one brags about the distribution center deal they did at cocktail parties, but everybody knows where the new Starbucks went in, or the new bar or restaurant.
But again, the difference, can you go over it for them just quickly for industrial?
What makes an A, B, and C?
Because we've been talking about that for the other asset classes, so it'd be good for them to have how you guys differentiate.
Sure. So typically the first thing that we look at is functionality of the building. Is there a degree of functional obsolescence, right? Has the building standard changed? So A buildings are usually very recently constructed. Almost all of them right now, construction-wise, are tilt concrete, where they literally pour it like they pour the slab, and then they just pull it up together like an erector set. So it's cheaper, and they build them a lot quicker. So if you want an A building, you're probably looking at minimum 30 or 32 foot clearance height. And then precast, like we talked about, you have to make sure you have at least 150 feet from the edge of the dock door so you can stage the trailer and have circulation, and then trailer parking. And then condition, right? If you beat the snot out of the thing, or if it's in good shape, it's obviously going to dictate if it's an A, B, or C. A B building is probably going to be a little bit lower eave height. Eave height is where the roof meets the exterior wall. Anyone have an idea why eave heights are important in warehouses?
Truck clearance.
Sir?
Truck clearance.
That's one reason, but they're usually a lot higher than that. There's another one, but you're on the right track. Cubic storage, right? So if most pallet racks are about 8 feet. So that's why a lot of times you'll see them be 24 foot or 32 foot clear, so that they can get 3 positions up, right? If I'm paying on a per square foot basis and I can make use of it on a cubic basis, right? If I have the same amount of square feet, but I can get that extra pallet rack up, I have 25% more efficiency in the same footprint, right? So B buildings might have a slightly lower eave, might be precast panels instead of tilt. Maybe the approaches and the circulation aren't as good. C buildings probably made out of metal, probably has terrible dock approaches. Some of the buildings in Charleston, you have to like K-turn out of the road when they're building them in the 70s. They're just god awful. And then a D building is basically something that a bolt of lightning would be an improvement, and it's usually owned by legacy families that have no basis in it, so they can afford to rent it for peanuts, and they just take the low-hanging fruit. So that's kind of how we break it down or go down the list. Not everybody needs an A building. Not everybody wants to pay for it. For most people, warehouses aren't something that are customer-facing, so that's why they tend to be drabber buildings. They're not as exciting to look at because it's shade and shelter is what you're seeking, and security. You're not trying to make an impact, typically. Walmart's an example. Someone here, I just told you about the Sam's Club. Gerber. We've got a whole bunch of bigger guys that we haven't had historically. This was kind of an interesting little tidbit. We talked about Amazon and how they disrupt everything. So a couple years ago, they filed for a patent for basically like a blimp-supported distribution center. Now, how feasible is that? I don't know. People freak out about drones being overhead. I can't imagine anyone being happy about a floating warehouse. I don't know if any of you guys saw the Avengers, but that's kind of what I have in my head. Is like, I don't know. So we'll see what happens. But the point is, it is creative, alternative strategies. People trying to find a way to disrupt, an established order of things, and that's what Amazon's been very, very good at doing. So I wouldn't bet against Bezos. Anyway, manufacturing plants, right? Most of the time when you think of those things, I don't know if you guys are like me, but I had never stepped foot in a warehouse in my life, and I grew up in North Jersey until I got into this business. So when people told me about factories, I thought of like, people like smelting iron and like doing all these crazy things and furnaces and whatever else. Well, modern day manufacturing in this country does very, very little of that. Most of what we do here is called final assembly. If you go into the Boeing plant, it's quieter than it is in this classroom right now. And every once in a while, all you hear is the air guns going from the pneumatic guns, riveting things together. There's no smells. It's crazy how much more pleasant an environment than I thought it would be. So again, supply chain. Boeing loves it here, and they picked us here for a multitude of reasons. Not the least of which is because we're a right-to-work state and have the lowest unionization rate in the country. But in addition to that, in terms of your linkages, we have an airport with a dedicated runway that they can make use of. They have land right next to that runway. They have access to the port if they need it for raw materials. So those are all things that they liked, and obviously an available labor force. So any of you guys know how the fuselages that get built out at Boeing get back to Seattle? And why do they fly them? Why not just put it on the boat, right? The port's right there. Why not just ship it around there? Right, and why does that matter?
Time is money.
Exactly. You know how much one of those jets costs? With no engines and no seats, it's $220 million a pop for a 737. $220 million bucks. So if I have a $90 million fuselage and I have to wait 3 months for it on a boat, who's carrying that and who's paying for that? Boeing. So when you're doing 12 of those a month, they figured it out really quick. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this. The giant plane that kind of looks a little like a woman's hygiene product out there on the runway. You know what I'm talking about? It's called the Dream Lifter, but it's like a giant tube. It looks almost like a paper towel, you know, with like a tiny little cockpit out of the front of it, like a tube of paper towels. Anyway, they actually open the front of that in and then slide a complete fuselage in there, and then they assemble the wings and whatever else they need out there for those. But anyway, funny story too, you guys know phones get flown too because they go obsolete so quickly. They don't go by water either. And one of the funniest things that I found out in my travails here is women's fashion also goes by plane, because by the time I got there in a boat, all y'all ladies are on to the next fad. So it's not always high-end electronics or things that they ship. Sometimes it can be something that's just time sensitive, to go back to your other point. So obviously, I'm sure a lot of you guys heard Volvo landed here. If they do anything like Boeing did, that'll be good news for all you guys looking to enter the job force, the labor market here. In the 10 years that Boeing went here, they went from 0 employees to being the largest private employer in the region. And I think after the government, they are the largest employer here. So people are kind of cautiously optimistic that maybe we'll have a similar impact there. The other reason why everyone likes Boeing, the average family of 4 in Charleston County lives off of $44,000 a year. Yeah, I don't know how they do that. I mean, I don't even know how you bribe milk on that. But anyway, at Boeing, the average salary there is like $65,000 a year, you know, per employee. So, and that's the average one. So you can see that that's a much higher paying job than when I was out here interviewing to be a pedicab driver. You know, that's the overhead shot, so you guys can kind of get an idea of it. Originally, this was Vought and Aerolina, which were 2 subsidiaries of Boeing, and they failed to produce. And Boeing has a one-strike policy. If you fail up or you disappoint them, you are gone. That is the end of it. If you're a supplier, that plane, if you're missing a 10-cent washer, cannot go airborne. So they literally cannot have anybody going, oh, well, we had everything except the seat covers. It's all good. Well, great. Now I got to wait however many months or weeks to get it out. It's costing me time and money, so they don't play. That big building with the solar panels on it, for anybody who likes engineering or used to build stuff, that is 1 million square feet, that building, okay? And there's not a single internal load-bearing column in there. It's called a clear span building. So all of the load on that is being borne by the walls and roof. Anyone want to venture a guess why they don't want columns in the middle? Right, you know how hard it is to parallel park a plane? So being able to move it around is important to them. So I think it's 20 football fields if you're looking for scale. If that helps you, more than 1 million square feet, it's kind of an arbitrary number. And if you want to know a real estate cheat way to figure anything out in a commercial building, most of these ceiling tiles are 2 feet by 2 feet. So if you ever want to get a quick reference of how big the room you're in. Now, if you guys can't figure out the geometry after that, that's on her. This is also one of the things kind of highlighting, you know, their proximity and where Boeing is and why it's nice. Obviously, you have the port locations here, and then you're right on top of the airport there. We put the map up because my interns, and I guess none of you guys understand that there's a community out here off of the peninsula. So like anytime I send an intern anywhere, like I had to give them like detailed instructions if it was not on the peninsula. So Flex Integration Space, this is the one that you guys didn't guess earlier, right? Any of you guys ever heard of Spay War? What's Spay War?
Government contracts. My mom works there, so.
Right, Space and Naval Weapons Station, right? Research. So they develop command control, modulations, radios, communication, jamming, whatever it is. So nothing I'm good at. I had to copy off all those guys to get through math classes. All those engineers and stuff like that work in what's called integration spaces. So they have office space in the front, and they have climate-controlled test benches where they work on components which are obviously sensitive to the weather and to humidity down here, so it needs to be air-conditioned. So they usually have a roll-up door in the back, but if you go into it, it actually looks more like a college campus. In addition to the military, our Spay War facility is the second largest in the country. The largest one's in San Diego. And again, high-paying jobs for engineers and really bright people and things that you want to attract for the region. The other thing that uses a lot of flex space is pharmaceutical companies. A lot for the same reason, again, because you're handling things that need to be in a clean environment, climate-controlled. You're not going to go slap it up in some dingy warehouse somewhere. I don't know if you guys ever seen this building before. This just sold for $69 million, and no, I was not in on the deal because I'd still be nursing the hangover from that. $69 million is nothing to sneeze at. It's one of the largest transactions that's traded here recently. And again, almost all of the contractors in here are tied to the federal government and tied to the Spay War operations, because this building is located very close to the old Navy base, and we're the joint base over there for the Air Force and everything. Now, one of the things that you learn as you dive a little deeper into real estate is almost every one of these tenants in there has a clause in there that says in the event of BRAC, they can terminate their lease without penalty. Anyone know what BRAC is? I'm going to ask you again if your mom works out there. So I'd be impressed if you did. But anyway, I'm impressed anyway. How about that? But it stands for Base Realignment and Closure. So if the government comes in and says, hey, we no longer need this facility anymore, we're going to shut it down and go somewhere else. Where all these other tenants are going, well, if my customer goes away, there's no reason for me to be here. So as you guys are doing valuation and whatever else, that's good information to know when you're evaluating that property, right? And then you have to take the calculated risk of really what's the possibility that I'm going to get hit with base realignment and closure. It only comes up every 5 years. So if you duck it for 5 years, you might own it for 10, and then it's hot potato, you sell it again, and someone else has to deal with it. But if I know all my tenants have an out, I can't afford to pay as much for that building as I would if they were all, concrete or solid leases with no outs. Some of the platitudes and things that we've won. Obviously, a lot of people want to come out here and do business in Charleston for the same reason why you guys wanted to come to school here, right? Great weather, quality of life, low taxes. Well, you guys don't care about taxes yet, but it's a fun place to be. There's a lot of great stuff going on, and they're attracting more and more talent, and guys like you are that talent. That's who employers are going after. Travel destination, I'm sure all you guys have heard about this. Again, that's all from the Charleston Regional Development Alliance. You can ask them what the metrics are and how they got to that. I just like the favorable numbers. I don't necessarily need to peel back the onion too much. All right, so that was the image that was supposed to be in the front, kind of showing you the connections here of where everything comes in and out of. So obviously everyone can see why that's such an important thing. You guys got to realize that up until 1910, 1912, if you wanted to mail something to San Francisco over on water, you had to go around the tippy tip of South America and go all the way up. So the Panama Canal shaved like 3 months of transit time off for people. So that's remarkable. We're talking about the cost of carrying things and whatever else, not to mention the risk and exposure of that much further distance to travel. These are some of the roughest waves and seas in the entire world. So obviously that was a big deal. And if you want to learn more about Panama, Dr. Warzala usually has a Maymaster trip and takes people down there. I was lucky enough to go one year, and it was awesome. Complete white glove treatment from the locals. They take you through all kinds of different institutions down there, introduce you to a bunch of people. And again, as someone with no engineering or math background, it is still breathtaking to see what these people built, and even more so when you think that they did it without a single computer chip, without a single calculator. They did it all with slide rules, pen and paper, and without a single gas-powered engine working on anything. So it was just steam and sweat, and more people died building that than in the U.S. casualties in Vietnam. So think about that.
Mike, can I make a quick announcement on that? If anybody is still interested in considering going on that Panama trip, there is still apparently scholarship money available. So I believe it was a $2,000 scholarship. The class is running June 19th to the 26th, I believe. And so it's summer one. And basically you can leave from wherever you want in the country and go back. So if you're already at an internship or you're already back from where you're from, whatever, you can leave from there. And that $2,000 basically covers the program fee. So you still have to pay for your ticket and your tuition, but it does cover the fee. And of course you can put it on your resume as a scholarship, so that helps. So we still have room in the class, and there is still apparently scholarship money available. So let us know if you're interested. Again, it counts as an elective for many of your majors, and you can take it either as Real 360, which is the one I'm overseeing, or Tran 360 if you happen to be in the supply chain program. But it counts as an elective for a lot of the other majors, including finance and obviously those two.
I liked it so much, I actually had my friend Trevor over there help me make a video. And if you go to YouTube, type my name in Panama Canal, you'll see the little video we did.
About it. I should just
and
tell everybody, get them enticed.
Yeah, so it was fun, it was cool. And it'll help you understand how all this interconnectivity matters. I don't know how many of you guys realize this. You hear people talk about the port all the time. Well, it's not just one location here in this community. We have 4 containerized terminals and 1 for breakbulk. Anyone know the difference between containerized cargo and breakbulk? Oh my God, I know this is so riveting. So, well, no, I know it is, but and that's why I do it for a living. Anyway, so the difference is containerized stuff is all the stuff you see in the trucks coming down the road, and when you see like at the Wando Welsh, so the little boxes coming on and off. So things that can be easily stacked and put in those things move that way. It's obviously a lot faster and easier. Breakbulk stuff is like coal, timber, larger things that you're not going to necessarily fit in the box, aggregate, stone, concrete, whatever else you might need. And then the last one that we have over there, which I forgot to mention, is called row cargo. Roll on, roll off. So that's what that means. So like BMW, a lot of you may not know this, but what is it, every X5, I guess, in the globe gets made up in Spartanburg and then gets exported out of here. So that's why you see those trains coming down, double stacked with all the BMWs. Yes, ma'am?
Aren't like most of the BMWs, like the drivers on the right side, is actually like,
Backward and European? Yes.
back to Europe?
They do. They make them on both sides, the right hand and the left hand drive. That's correct. They make it for both sides. So I don't know if you've ever tried driving, especially manual, on the other side of the car and then on the other side of the road. It's very disconcerting, and I don't recommend it to anyone, ever. So, but again, that was just my experience. So any of you guys know what dredging is? Any of you heard anything about it in the news? Are you raising your hand, or
Yeah.
you're hiding from me? Oh, there you are. Sorry, miss.
Dredging to like put in a dock or something in the water.
Yes, you can do that to put in a dock. In this particular instance, they are doing it so that they get more draft depth. So that means that they can get bigger boats that have more stuff on them that sink lower in the water. So you'll see there's like a big fight, obviously, with the elected officials on where that money's going to come from, federal level, state level, local level. And in the end, there's going to be grants from all of those to dredge it deeper. Once that's done, we will actually have the deepest port in the southeast. Some people may throw Norfolk out there at you because they're at 95 feet. But what they don't tell you is that that deep draft over there is for nuclear submarines and aircraft carriers, not for shipping vessels. So if you guys ever need to fall asleep quickly, I suggest you read all that. Otherwise, don't concern yourself with it. And this is the expansion that we were talking about here, right? The old Navy base, again, we're talking about BRAC, base realignment and closure. In 1995, Charleston had a mine sweeping plant in North Charleston, which was shuttered due to base realignment and closure. And it took about 20 years, and they finally got control of that land because of all the different jurisdictions it was under, and they're redeveloping it. And half of that site is going to be a new container terminal, very similar to like what you see out at the Wando Welsh. It's going to look a lot like that. And I guess it's Leatherman. Hugh Leatherman was the guy who got all the money for it, so they're naming it after him. Go figure. Politicians like to see their names on stuff, right? And this is kind of funny too, because when I got in the business, they told me it was going to open in like 2014, and it was like 2002, and I was like, man, that's so far away. I want to be like so old. And here I am, like way older than that, and it's still not open. So obviously, this is not like, you know, building a condo somewhere. There's a whole lot more that goes into this, and that's why it's taken a while. So Charleston Airport, again, we talk about linkages. We talked about the seaport. The airport obviously is very important for things like Boeing, and not only Boeing, but also human capital, human talent, right? Getting people in and out, connectivity is important. When I first moved down here, it was more expensive to fly than it is now because there's so many fewer routes. And you had to do every single flight basically through Charlotte or Atlanta. Now we have a lot more directs than we did initially when I moved down here. Talked about some of the people located down here. Gerber's in a 600,000 square foot facility. Volvo, 300 acres they knocked down, or 1,000 acres, I can't remember. I think they got options to go out to 1,000 acres. So that's how big they're going to be. And they're looking at potentially up to 6,000 jobs created here over the next 10 years. Google, I'm sure you guys have all heard of. How many of you guys are aware that Google has a huge facility here in Charleston? Oh, look at that. Okay, we have two. Do you guys know what they do up there? Yeah, nobody does. But so they basically have a giant server farm. And the reason why they located down here was because there's cheap water, which they need to cool all the processors and whatever else, and available software engineers and talent. It's actually up in Goose Creek. And Mount Holly Commerce Park up there, it borders up against that, but they have at least 100 acres up there that they control, and they don't let anyone on there. Super, super secretive. But again, those are all employment opportunities that are way better than my pedicab offers. So you guys are in luck in that regard. The last element in the equation and why people want to get down here, right? You have to have labor. You have to have your linkages, right, for industrial stuff. You have to have demand. And then the last thing is, well, what's the government going to do? What's their part of it? A lot of times you guys hear about stuff on the news. I don't know if you guys saw AOC got in a real big fight with Amazon about, how dare the government hand them $28 billion or whatever it was. You guys all know that that's factually incorrect, right? Like, when Amazon goes somewhere, they don't just like write Jeff Bezos a personal check for $28 billion and go, here you go. What they do is they offer them incentives and tax creation so that they will go and move people there. They were talking about $20,000 or 20,000 jobs all over 6 figures that were going to go to that community. So why would the government offer people and these big companies free stuff? What's the point? Why do they do it? Anyone have a guess? Yes.
More money in the state, like more, whenever you create jobs in the state, then there's more actual money within the state because people come there for the jobs. So then the government gets more money.
Correct, right? So it's called the economic multiplier effect. So if you go on to any of the Charleston Regional Development Alliance or the Chamber of Commerce websites, they'll show you and talk about for every 1 direct job that Boeing does, they say that there's up to 3 indirect jobs that get created because now you need more bank tellers, more laundromats, more restaurants, everything else to cater to the other people coming in. So from the government's point of view, they go, listen, we will lock in your taxes, oftentimes using a vehicle called a fee in lieu of taxes, or FILO agreement, if you've ever heard of it. So they sit there and go, okay, listen, the millage rate's 10, and you normally would be paying $1 million a year in property taxes. We will hold that at $200,000 a year, and I'm picking arbitrary numbers, guys, based on jobs that you're going to create and then how quickly you get there, and then also what they call CapEx, capital expenditures. If you're building new buildings, machinery, equipment, I mean, how expensive do you think it is for Boeing to go and slap up one of those, 1,000,000 square foot clear span buildings? You know what I mean? We're talking about real dollars. So, unfortunately, people hear these big words bandied about, and then all they see is Jeff Bezos, who's worth $1 gazillion, and they think he's getting corporate welfare. Well, it can be argued, like I said, on either point, but from where I stand, I think the investment in communities generally tends to outweigh the negative. That's one of the other things that, oh, yes, ma'am.
Didn't Boeing buy like the land like where they have now for like something like a penny or something because of?
They bought it for $11 million, which to them is like a penny. Oh, no, I'm serious, and I'm not trying to say that to be snarky. I mean, think about it. My tiny little company, if I lose a pack of pens, that's like what $11 million is to them. So each one of the engines hanging under the wings is 10 to 20 million bucks. So like when everyone heard that, when it was announced before they actually came out and did it, everyone's like, oh, they got to be here. They spent $11 million. Like, that's nothing to them, but to me it is, but not to them. But sometimes they do that, depending if the government already owns the land, they can give it to you, like if they have a park they're trying to develop. And they did buy that from the airport authority, and then there was some private land they bought as well. It was a trailer park that they took and redid. But because Boeing was coming in, they used eminent domain to like knock over a couple buildings that were out there. The Board of Realtors used to be housed out there. That all got demolished to accommodate them. Tax breaks, which we talked about, like fee and low tax agreements. Grants. So sometimes if you are in the tech business or pharmaceutical business, they will offer you incentives to come and to do that as they try to build clusters of talent in one area. What you'll probably notice about this is all the incentives go up the further away from metropolitan areas you go. And why do you think that is?
Less people. Or we gotta transport them.
Miss?
Possibly because they want to create jobs out there.
Correct, that's exactly it, right? So if you've got a small community, it used to be an agricultural community, it used to be a tobacco community, and they're dying out there, if they can get a Sara Lee plant or a factory out there, they've got a labor pool they can tap, a tax basis, revenue stream for the local community, and politically it's a little easier to give those guys money than, after Volvo and Boeing, the upstate starts fighting and going, well, y'all are getting everything, and we want stuff to come up here or to go to the Midlands or to go somewhere else. These rural communities are a little easier usually to bankroll. And not only that, but they're a little less attractive to be there. So you have to give the employers a little something extra to go out there and locate out there. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but tangentially, they do a lot with physicians now. If you're going to medical school and you agree to be a general practice doctor in some of these rural areas, they'll forgive your loans as a way to incentivize you to go out and do that. So it's kind of analogous to that. So how many people in this class today?
Probably 30.
Right.
Is
So,
everybody here today, I hope? Yeah, it's 31 if they're all here.
well, based on that math, that's about how many people move here every single day. Every single day, 7 days a week, that's how many people join our community. And that number's been as high as 45. So it's come down a little bit. They've tried to tamper growth and try to not have the roads completely grind to a halt, but I remember when I was on the right side of that number, the middle one there, relatively young community, still active. And that's what people like to see, right? You got young, available labor and consumers. Now we know where Charleston is, how we're linked in with the rest of the globe, where we're going, and what's happening in industrial real estate, right? So earlier on in the presentation, I talked to you about disruption and how retail and office and a lot of other things have been getting significantly impacted by technology. And as you can imagine, you can develop an app and bring that to market a lot faster than you can build a 100,000 square foot office building. So those are all things you got to worry about. So if you're a developer, you constantly want to be monitoring trends to see how they're going to impact the future. And even though my market is, hasn't been impacted as bad, you always have to be on the lookout for things like this. I'll give you an example. Many of you guys are aware Donald Trump imposed tariffs on China. They responded by doing the same thing to us. Well, all of those things have consequences other than just a headline for whichever side of the fence you lean to, right? One of those specific things was I have 2 buildings out on Clements Ferry that total 150,000 square feet. And Daimler Chrysler leased both those buildings on a month-to-month basis and decided that rather than see what happens with the tariffs, right, and pay the import duties and everything else, that they would lease these warehouses on a month-to-month basis because it was cheaper to have that and to have oversupply here stateside than the uncertainty of dealing with what will happen with the tariff situation, see how it gets resolved. So that's one of the ways that policy dictates what happens here on the ground for the guys on the ground like me. So global instabilities, that goes back to like trade wars with China. Obviously, armed conflicts are a big problem. I don't know if you guys have watched. Any of you guys paying attention to what's going on in the South China Sea? Anyone knows what's happening there? Nobody? All right, so the Spratly Islands are claimed by 9 different countries. China has gone and started building armed bases on a lot of these islands, and Brunei and the Philippines don't have the muscle to push them off it. So why would China want all these crummy little islands in the middle of nowhere that they got to dredge and build into bases? Anyone have a guess? Right. It's a part of the One Belt, One Road initiative, but the reason why they want all that is because severalfold. Number one, China's basically circled by the United States, so they want to have a dedicated artery in and out to get their oil and raw materials in and out in the event of conflict. So they're very, very defensive about that. Number two, there's rumors that there's big oil and gas reserves in there, and your exclusive economic zone extends out just roughly about 200 miles off of your coast. So if I can get a couple islands 300 or 400 miles away in the middle of the South China Sea, I increase that radius for my rights to drill and to take minerals. But to the earlier point, and the one that's most germane to our conversation, over $1 trillion worth of trade goes through there. It's roughly 25% of the global trade goes through the South China Sea. So you can see why that's almost as important as like the Panama Canal is to us. And that's why they're willing to defend it so vigorously. E-commerce, we talked about disruption from that. Talked about what happened to retailers. So what are the biggest threats in my world? So this is something that's kind of neat. I don't know if you guys are focusing on this, but shoemakers, right, are already doing things like rather than ship you the box with all the stuffing and all the stuff in it when I buy your sneakers or whatever else, you can go into a Foot Locker, step on a scanner, it'll scan your foot, and then 3D build the shoe in the store for you. So you get a custom fit, you can customize it, and you're moving a jar of material that's this big and a lot easier to ship and transport versus a big box like this, which has a lot of air and dead space in it. To give you an idea, some of those post-Panamax ships, if you look up in a video online, the ones that are coming through Panama now and coming into Charleston now that we dredge, can hold 69 million pairs of Adidas sneakers. So try to wrap your head around that. One of those ships is as big as the State House in Columbia, laid down on its side 4 times, like 4 of them next to each other. And they float. I sink like a rock in the ocean, but those things float. Other things that impact this thing, I said it earlier to be cheekier, but you know, a lot more people, if you go to Husk, you know, Sean Brock owns his pigs, and they're within an hour of here, and they try to source everything locally. So if I don't have to buy fruits and vegetables from other corners of the world, that shortens the supply chain. It's obviously better for your carbon footprint and for the community and the planet, but it also reduces demand for refrigerated warehouse space. Shameless plug for Dr. Warzala's program, because I really did have fun. And if any of you guys can con your parents into doing it, totally worth it. So
Yes, and they don't have to con them. That's a really good choice.
I would definitely recommend it. We had a super good time, and they do mix in some fun. They're not like taskmasters on the trip. You know, you learn a lot, but you still get to have some fun. All right, this is just a goof, and I don't know why the video doesn't work either, but I was kind of bummed because this guy, his job is to launch frozen chickens at airplane wings or windshields all day. Where the heck was that guy at career day? Like, my guidance counselor never told me that I could make a living blowing crap up like that. So anyway, the reason why I put it up there is just to be mindful. I mean, I remember when I was a senior in college and I was getting ready to graduate, and I was probably the most anxious I've ever been in my life. Thought I was going to have an anxiety attack every other day because for the first time in my life, my future hadn't been planned for me. From the time I was in kindergarten, my parents were like, you're going to college, you're going to college, you're going to college. And then I called my dad. I'm like, well, I'm done with college. And I'm like, now what? He's like, well, figure it out. I was like, awesome. You are my rock. Thanks, Dad. And so I empathize with you. And just remember that you don't have to be defined by what you do for a living. You can either take passion in what you do or make enough money in what you do to go pursue your passions. And take risks. If you want to launch chickens at a window, go do it. Knock yourself out. Your first job's not going to be what you're slated to and tied to your whole life. But you know, it's a lot easier to take risks when you're 21, 22, 23 than when you're 40, have a 5-year-old and a wife and a mortgage. My last intern wants to go live in Australia, and I couldn't support her more to go do that. Go see the world now. Go swing big. The greatest part about this, guys, is once you graduate and you're done, you realize you can have all the benefits of being an adult with very little of the responsibility. So it's a great time. You know, make the most of it, enjoy it, embrace it. Like I said, when I graduated college, it was right before 9/11, and I graduated, was living in my parents' basement, waiting tables across the street from the restaurant I was waiting tables at before I left for college. So that's kind of why I ended up moving down here on a lark. But the point is, very, very few people, I don't care who you are, they're probably being disingenuous with you if they tell you they knew from the time they were 18 that this is what they were going to do and, you know, passionate about forever. Like I said, I kind of fell into this. This wasn't something that I planned on doing, but by getting out there and meeting people, these opportunities arose for me. I was able to do it. So back to her point earlier about networking, college is important. The stuff you learn in your class is important. And I'm not telling you not to focus on or put a lot of time and effort into your classwork, but put a lot more intention and effort into the people sitting next to you, because down the road, they may be the people to get you a job or your kid a job or your clients or your friends or their parents may have an opportunity for you. Who you know is equally important, if not greater important than what you know, because you know, if you've graduated from college, it shows that you're trainable, you can meet a deadline, and you can learn things. And that's what people want to see. Most people know when you come into a job, you're going to have very little practical knowledge on how to actually execute that job. You're going to have to be trained by your employer. So think about all that stuff. One of the other things that I had no idea about when I was in school was all the different types of real estate. Like when I was in college and people were telling me I should go into real estate, I was like, I don't want to sell houses and I don't want to sit at apartments and lease apartments to people. Well, I didn't realize that there was all these other opportunities. Obviously, you could be an academic like Dr. Warzala, who has an appraisal background. If you like the problem solving and the research associated with it, but you don't necessarily like selling, it's a great avenue for people. Brokerage, you have to have a big mouth like me and not scared to meet new people. If you're an extrovert, it's a great fit for you. Corporate real estate. One of the designations I have, Masters of Corporate Real Estate through Cornet. Publicly traded companies usually have departments that handle, like if you're Microsoft and you have 3 million square feet of office space across the country or 30 million across the globe, you need a team of people to oversee that, make sure that it's managed efficiently, that you have the right amount of space for the right amount of employees. So that's all, again, real estate blocking and tackling without the sales component of it. So there's another opportunity there.
Mike, can I interrupt 1 second on that one too?
Sure.
I was just actually talking with Mike knows this individual, Dean Jordan. You met him when he was up here last year. He has an opportunity if anybody wants to read. He's got apparently some interviews that have been done with major corporate real estate executives, and he wants to create podcasts for people to like listen to them in their car. You know, so members of Cornet can go and download this podcast about XYZ super famous person. So anyways, he needs readers. And so he's willing to pay, and he's, you know, by the hour, and you would just be you'd learn too, because you'd be reading about these people, and then your name would be on it. And so if anybody's interested, shoot me an email, because I'm going to see him this week in Arizona. He's going to the same conference I'm going to. And I told him I would try to find some students for him. So if you're interested, You know, it'd be a good opportunity to get connected with. It's called CoreNet is the organization, and basically that's the designation that Mike has. And it's corporate real estate executives that are the members, and those are the people that would be hearing you read. The networking opportunity, plus he makes a little bit of money.
Hey, why not, right? Better than flipping burgers. All right, so real estate development, obviously, right? How do you get something from a patch of dirt into whatever building you want there, or how do you get something from an old dilapidated building into a new one? Development's usually something that you start usually as an analyst or a runner, kind of work your way up. It's usually a little bit higher on the food chain, but again, if you're connected or know people, it's a great industry to get into. Private equity, obviously, managing large sums of money, whether it's for teachers' pensions, whomever. A lot of them invest in real estate. And then if you are a super nice person with super thick skin who doesn't like getting credit for anything, be a property manager, because no one ever calls you the 99% of the time that the air conditioning works. But when it doesn't, oh boy, you hear from them. So it takes a special breed. I admire the heck out of people who do that. I'd probably have a rap sheet because I don't really like people calling and complaining to me all the time. So not the fit for me. But anyway, so don't just think of it as a sales job. There's plenty of things you can do in this industry. And I see the rest of my time. If you guys have any questions about me, the industry, or Charleston, I'm happy to answer them. And if not, I'm happy to go to the bar. So.
Too early for the bar. We have about 10 minutes, so who's got some questions? Again, you've got probably one of the more connected industrial guys in the city here with a lot of experience with big companies and little.
Just out of curiosity, out of all the sectors of real estate, what made you choose industrial?
That's a very good question. And I wish I could tell you that it was calculated and I sat down and thought about it. The first company that I went to go work for, they're like, hey, we need someone to put together an industrial market survey. And they hired me basically as an intern and paid me less than minimum wage. And after about 3 months, I had put together a report and published the very first industrial market survey ever done in Charleston. And you'd think I was on an easy street from there, but all I got was a bunch of calls from the establishment down here telling me that no one wants any more Yankees down here. Don't be giving out our data to people. They were mad because the way they used to track like that 65 million square foot number, first survey I did, I came up with 27 million. At the time, they were tracking 7 million square feet if you call the chamber. What they were doing is waiting for these like 60-year-old dudes to like fax over a piece of paper and hopefully they got the right ones in there. So when I told them that the market was 4 times bigger than what they were tracking, they obviously thought that I was sniffing glue. Obviously, it turned out that I was right, and the market's doubled in size since then. But I was not well received. But to answer your question, it was what I was told to do, and then they told me I could get hired on as a broker if I wanted to do industrial. And lastly, there's a lot less industrial brokers than office and retail because, again, no one cares even if you crush one in industrial. Like I said, it's not fun to brag about. You drive around in sketchier neighborhoods. You don't have things like air conditioning in your listings. So, you know, all these soft office brokers wearing their ties and lame, weak. Anyway, so, and then all the retail guys, you know, I didn't want to go and look at women's fashion all day and pretend to care about that. Didn't just appeal to me. So it was a combination of factors, but mostly it was where the opportunity was. And like anything, once you start getting a little success and good at it, all of a sudden it becomes more fun. But I wasn't like, oh boy, doors and eave heights and column spacing. Like it wasn't, like I said, what gets me out of bed in the morning. But what I like out of the business is A, meeting new people, and B, solving problems. So it's really, really fun to do that. I sell the invisible, so there's nothing tangible that people can touch about my service. So you have to find other ways to make it worthwhile for you and to derive job satisfaction from that. Thank you for the question. It was a good question. Anyone else? Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Oh, did you have one?
Yeah, I had a question just about like mall space and what do you see with the future of like malls that are already created that basically are closing just because of lack of people using the retail space. Like, could you then come in and like repurpose the space, or like do you think that just like more entertainment-based like companies would come in and have stores?
Also a very good question. Did you guys all hear what he asked? All right. So A, I'm going to make this disclosure and say I am not a retail guy, so I don't. I can't speak to this the way I can about the industrial stuff, but any of you guys been out to Citadel Mall? Right? Well, they used to have a big box department store out there, and MUSC just moved in and took over that space, and they're doing a health and clinic kind of environment for people out there. So what they've tried to do is focus on things that people still do live and in person and not online. So they're trying to find, that's why you see so many fitness things going in there. They're trying to find things like everything from paintball to airsoft, different types of things to fill up these large chunks. Sometimes they cut them into flex space or WeWork kind of spaces. So, but that's a multi-billion-dollar question, and if you can come up with a good angle on that, it's a great opportunity to go and make a lot of money, because the threat is real, and a lot of those guys are getting hammered, so they are looking for ways to utilize what they have there. Colleges, you see a lot of them going there, Strayer universities, the Phoenixes and all that stuff going there. But excellent question. Anyone else?
And actually, he's right, though. There's no reason why some of those users that need the clean space, that, you know, like your flex office,
Flex, that would
flex
be
industrial, I
used
mean,
for a
you're
lot.
right. I mean, you could potentially be a user. Some of them, like
Certainly.
Spain.
Anyone else? Well, hey, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. If you guys have any questions or comments, I left some cards up here, if anyone still does that in your age group. I'm happy to answer questions. Like I said, I try to be a resource for the kids about your futures or whatever else. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, about half the class is going to be going out to do internships. Given you've had interns, what's some good advice for the interns to excel right away when they go out and start working for somebody?
All right, she lobbed in a softball. I got to take a rip at this one. So first and foremost, right, 80% of life is showing up. Make sure you're there, and if you're not there, let somebody know. I had an intern who was an excellent intern, but on 2 different Mondays just didn't feel like showing up. Didn't call, didn't text me. I'm like, I'm on every social media platform. I'm like, short of a courier pigeon, there's no reason, like, any method of communication would have got to me. And again, as an employer, we take concern over your stock and safety and well-being. If you're not there and we don't know where you are, well, I don't want Dr. Rizal to call and ask me, you know, or God forbid something happens and I can't find you. So number one, show up. And if not, most employers know your college kids, and if you give them enough heads up, they're not going to get too terribly mad at you if you have to miss a day for whatever reason. So that's the first thing. Second thing, you guys got to realize that when you get into the workforce, you're not dealing with your peers. You're dealing with your peers' parents. So talk to the people at work like you talk to your friends' parents, not like you talk to each other. So don't say things like totes or cray-cray. Don't write that crap down in emails. That's freaking ridiculous. You're adults now. So those are the types of things to be mindful of. Know your audience. And then just be accountable. If people give you stuff, close the loop. If they ask you to do something, notify them, let them know it was done. If you have a question, raise your hand and speak up and say, hey, I don't understand, or I didn't get sufficient directions. Things like that. And most people want you to have fun. They want you to learn something. And the last thing I would tell you about taking an internship is don't be afraid to take something that seems completely out there or that you wouldn't think you'd want to do. Finding out what you don't want to do is almost as important as finding out what you do like, because it helps you narrow things down. And you'll find different elements of things or jobs that you like or you don't. I don't know, did I miss anything?
Those are the main ones.
So. All right, cool.
Thank you very
All right,
much.
thanks, guys.